Hello everybody, my name is Sam and welcome back to Logic. Today we're going to explore different methods of learning vocabulary in any language. Then we will analyse how English vocabulary works and how we can use its peculiarities to our advantage. Before we start, it's worth mentioning that if we look at the three pillars of languages, namely vocabulary, grammar and pronunciation, everyone reacts differently to them. When I speak a foreign language, I'm a perfectionist, so if I know that any of these elements is a little bit weak, it really bugs me. But whilst I can cope with imperfect grammar and pronunciation, what makes me freeze is the lack of vocabulary, which means that it's what makes me feel the most uncomfortable and which hinders my communication the most, because I don't feel like I can control the language and I can express myself as fully as I would like to. Knowing that I know a lot of words makes me feel in control, and I know that the main purpose of communication is to get your message across, and that can be achieved by rephrasing things, which means to say the same thing with different words and different structures. But mentally, vocabulary is most definitely my Achilles heel, which means my weakness. And when I say something, but I can feel in my bones that vocabulary-wise, it's not the most accurate, it makes me feel really deflated. Other people, however, may find grammar or pronunciation to be their weakest point mentally. So how do we learn vocabulary? Unfortunately, I would say that there is no one-size-fits-all method that is objectively better than others, but I believe it depends on how our individual brain works. So I will share with you what I do to learn words and what I find to be the most effective strategy for my own brain. Based on my experience with myself and students, when it comes to assimilating new vocabulary, I divide learners into reactive and preemptive. What does that mean? Some people learn words, or at least they learn them much more efficiently, when these are within a context where they need them. So, let's say that today you have to attend a work meeting about the benefits that your company offers to its employees. But suddenly and unexpectedly, the conversation turns to the annual turnover of the company. Now, you don't know what annual turnover means, so you look it up there and then, and now you will remember it. I call this reactive because you learn a word as a reaction to a situation that you find yourself in. And the reason why I think this happens is that this word is now contextualized and emotionally charged. Contextualized means that now it belongs to a situation and a context that has a relevance to you. And emotionally charged means that it also has emotional importance because you were probably uncomfortable not knowing the word, and this discomfort shocked your brain, which now doesn't want to feel like that anymore and will never forget the word. Some other people prefer learning a lot of words that are not related to a specific need or situation, but they just like the idea of knowing as many words as possible so they can express themselves fully in any situation, and also they can avoid the psychological shock of not knowing a word when needed. And I call this method preemptive because people do this in preparation for any possible future situation. Both methods are valid, but I'll tell you which one I belong to and how I go about learning vocabulary. I am definitely a preemptive learner. I learn a lot of words before I need them because it makes me feel like I can say whatever I want about whatever I want. And I am sure there are different ways of being a preemptive learner, but I'll tell you what I do, and I'm not going to lie, it is very time consuming, but language geeks like me like that sort of thing. Every time I enter a room, or generally go somewhere, I look around me and I ask myself if I know the name of every single object that I see. If I don't, I write it down on my phone, go home and look it up. And when I say every single object, I really do mean it. If I see a book, I also ask myself if I know what to call this part of the book. It's a dust jacket. Now, what are the chances of me ever using this word in any given language? They are very, very slim, but my brain is happy to know that it's there if I ever need it. As for my memorization process, that's what I invest the most amount of time in, because what I've found to be the most effective strategy for me is to look a word up and copy everything that the dictionary says into a notebook. This allows me to read through every single meaning and nuance and to understand it, and the writing part aids repetition. Unfortunately, that is not enough for me to remember words. What often happens after the first time that I've analysed them is that I completely forget about them and I actually forget looking them up specifically. But the next time I go over them, that's when they get burnt into my brain and I very rarely forget them. And this brings me to the beauty of English vocabulary. What I find fascinating about it is that one word can often have several and completely unrelated meanings, often based on the part of speech that it is, which is why I always recommend checking if one word is not only a noun, for example, but also an adjective or a verb. And now I will walk you through some examples to clarify this concept. So, if we look up the verb to walk, we find that the main meaning is obviously the idea of moving forward by putting one foot in front of the other. But also we find another meaning, such as to walk the dog, which has a similar meaning, which means to take a dog for a walk. But also we have completely different expressions, such as to walk free, to walk the walk, and also phrasal verbs, which, as we all know, have nothing to do with the main verb. And we have, for example, to walk somebody through something, or to walk over somebody. Now, if we analyse the same word as a different part of speech, we can see that it's also a noun, where the first meaning is obviously the idea of walking, but also we can find walk of life, which is the social class that you belong to. This has nothing to do with the idea of walking, but just like that, you know one more word. Let's have a look at the word duck. We all know that duck as a noun means a water bird, and we can also find it in some idioms, which are expressions that have a completely different meaning from their literal one. So if I say that something is like water off a duck's back, it means that it doesn't really affect you. But did you know that to duck is also a verb? It means to lower your body or your head, usually in order to avoid being hit or seen. You can hear it a lot in films where there is a shooting going on and a person is warning another to lower the body so they don't get shot. To leap means to jump high into the air, and if you leap at the opportunity, it means that you accept an opportunity eagerly and quickly. And if something leaps out at you, it means that you notice it particularly because it has something more interesting than other things. Leap as a noun usually means a big jump, but if you dig even deeper, you find out that a leap year is a year where February is 29 days long. So just by looking up an innocent word that you may have read in a book or heard on TV, you now know 5 different meanings for the same word. Now that we know how to use a dictionary, let's discuss the pros and cons of being reactive and preemptive. Reactive is much quicker and time-saving, and you mainly learn words that are relevant to you without wasting time on words that you may never need. Preemptive is much more time-consuming, but the likelihood of your vocabulary being more extensive is much higher because you have more time to analyse synonyms and little obscure meanings of the same word. When I learn a language, I start by being 100% preemptive because I need to expand my vocabulary as much as possible. But as I carry on with the studying, I notice that I shift towards being reactive because at that point, the amount of words that I don't know is much lower. In order to make this learning process as effective and fruitful as possible, it's of paramount importance to have a very good dictionary, which can show you all the synonyms, idioms, meanings, and examples of a word. The best dictionary that I can personally recommend is Longman Online Dictionary, which are not sponsoring this video, so this is just my genuine opinion. Let's look at the word clean, which can be a verb, a noun, an adjective, and an adverb, so it's definitely a versatile word that I recommend you look up and study. If we look at the verb to clean, we find that the main meaning is to remove dirt from something. And if we look at the thesaurus of this verb, which is the synonyms of the verb that a good dictionary would give you, we see that actually to clean is the most generic way of expressing this idea, because in English we can also say to wipe, to wash, to scrub, and to rinse. And as you can imagine, each of these words has a lot of several meanings of its own. And if we look at the verb to wipe, for example, we see that it has a lot of phrasal verbs, one of which is to wipe out. And to wipe something out means to remove and destroy something completely. And to wipe somebody out means to make someone extremely tired. So if you say that you are wiped out, it means that you are very tired, which you can also express in English with the words exhausted, shattered, and knackered. Now it's time to look at some pronunciation related to this topic. Words that have more than one syllable will have a stressed syllable, which is the most important one that we highlight with intonation, and the others will be unstressed. In the phonetic transcription that you find next to the spelling of a word in a dictionary, the stress is represented by an apostrophe, which means that the stress of the word falls onto the syllable following the apostrophe. If we look at the word topic, we see that the stress comes before the first syllable, which means that the first syllable is a stressed one. So we say topic instead of to pick, which would be the option if the stress fell onto the second syllable. We have seen that in English, one word can belong to different parts of speech. For example, the noun duck and the verb to duck. But duck only has one syllable, so the idea of stress doesn't really come into play. What is interesting is what happens when we have two-syllable words that belong to various parts of speech. In some cases, the difference between the verb and the noun is non-existent, so they are pronounced exactly the same with the same meaning. For example, the noun answer and the verb to answer are pronounced exactly the same with the stress on the first syllable, and the meaning doesn't change. The same applies to picture, reply, access. In some other cases, however, there is a shift in stress, often followed by a change in pronunciation. And on top of that, sometimes the meaning between the verb and the noun stays the same, but sometimes it changes as well. The rule is that the stress falls onto the first syllable if it's a noun or an adjective, and the second if it's a verb. So let's have a look at the verb to decrease, which means to become smaller in quantity or amount. Because it's a verb, the stress falls onto the second syllable, and we have a short sound for the first E. So we say decrease. When we transform it into a noun, we say decrease, where we register a shift in stress to the front, which in turn causes the first E to elongate. So we say E, decrease. The meaning between the verb and the noun stays the same because decrease is the idea of becoming smaller in quantity. Sometimes there is no change in sound. For example, to increase, increase. Some other examples are to export, export, to progress, progress, and I will leave a few more here for you to look up and try for yourselves. Some other times we have a change in stress, pronunciation, and meaning. The verb to present means to give a speech to propose a new idea, but the adjective present is the opposite of absent, and the noun present means gift. We also have to object, and object, to project, and project, and a few more for you to look up and try for yourselves. There are a couple of words that change the pronunciation of the final S based on the part of speech that they are. The rule goes that if it's a verb, we use a voiced Z, and if it's a noun or an adjective, we use the voiceless S. So, for example, we have to use, from which we get user because it's someone who uses something. And we have use, from which we get useful. The same applies to excuse and excuse, to house and house. And a fun fact about house is that its plural is irregular because the final S turns into a Z. So we say houses. We have to close the door, close. As I said, this doesn't happen very often. For example, the S stays the same in decrease and decrease. So that's it for this lesson. If you like this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and to subscribe to my channel down below. And if you have any observations about this topic or about any other topics that you would like me to talk about, please feel free to leave a comment. And I will see you soon with my next video.